Hi, so I'm going to call the meeting 4:03 p.m. on 3/30/21. Our first business item is just our discussion with the St. Lawrence Childcare Council. So start, go ahead and take it away.
Bruce, you have yourself muted.
Yep, I just unmuted. Again, I get it, because the last time we cheated. Dee Burlingame and I went online and watched from March 18th, so we realized there's a delay for more weeks. What happens in the conference room, so it just sounded like an echo in the background. So first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If Tony, if I understood correct, you wanted us to just go right ahead and jump in?
Yes, that would be good. We all got your email. So if you want to just start off with speaking, and then we can go ahead and ask questions after that. But if you want to start your presentation, that would be great.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I've got several pages of notes here based on listening to the initial meeting, and then also the notes that you had provided. Clearly, thank you for sharing the screen up there with the information. First and foremost, my name is Bruce Stewart. I'm the director of the St. Lawrence Childcare Council. This is my 28th year in this position. On the line with me, I have Dee Burlingame, who is a program coordinator. Dee has been with our agency 21 years now. And Katie Pinkerton may or may not be on. I didn't see her, but maybe she's on my phone. Katie is also our program provider service coordinator and the registrar supervisor. So that would be, I'll let Katie talk about that, but that's overseeing the family daycare providers and the folks that go out in the field to do those inspections and work with the family daycare providers throughout the county. The only thing I want to add to this is that Dee brings with her experience as a daycare center director in multiple states, and also serves as the current board chair for Canton Daycare Center over in Canton. At different times, Dee has also been a family daycare provider. So she understands both sides of this center-based, home-based situation. Katie also has center experience, but she ended up, she was the director of the after-school programs in Ogdensburg. And Katie, I'll let you clarify on that, but it was about 10 years when Cornell Cooperative Extension was operating programs in the Ogdensburg City School District here. I'm going to try to work through this as quickly as I possibly can, because I know there's going to be question and answer. So real quick, gleaning information from the last meeting. We are the St. Lawrence Childcare Council. We are funded primarily through the state of New York, Office of Children and Family Services, and also through the St. Lawrence County Department of Social Services for different contractual arrangements. Essentially, as a child care resource and referral, we are to be a community hub of information and references for anyone seeking information on child care, whether it's a parent, a community agency, a legislative individual, or such as we're talking about right now, we're here with your child care initiative at the Bridge and Port. We serve as the registrar for St. Lawrence County. That means for all of the family daycare providers working out of their homes and school-age child care programs, we are the individuals who work with those programs to get, I'm going to use a generic term, licensing, to get licensed, even though there is a difference, but they're to get licensed, and then following through with inspections, complaints, and everything that goes with that. In terms of our next biggest feature, we are a legally exempt enrollment agency. Long name, bottom of the line, it means if someone is watching children where the family is getting assistance to help pay for childcare, we are going to be involved in that process. and or helping families find assistance to help pay for childcare. I'm going to interject something before I get into the PDF that you have up on the screen, which I appreciate, and that is that Steve joined a meeting, Steve and Patricia joined a meeting with us yesterday morning. It was a meeting that was brought together by Arconic up in Messina, who was working on a business park, business complex plan, and the St. Lawrence County Workforce Development Board, Barb Lashua, Lori Sibley from the County IDA. We had Greg Hart on there from the North Country Workforce Development Initiative and also the Regional Economic Development Council. I'm missing somebody, I'm sure, but we also had on that call one of the nation's leading consultants on childcare as it relates to economic and workforce development, Bill Millett from North Carolina. So I just want you to understand that you're starting your initiative at about the same time as Arconic and several county entities are starting an initiative. So I'll leave it to Steve to discuss that with all of you, but we may be going down parallel roads where we can actually work together and serve your purposes as well as the needs that Arconic has for their the grant that they received from the Economic Development Council to do their study of whether or not it's feasible to do a business park on the old Alcoa grounds. So that's ironic that both of these are going and began roughly about the same time. The PDF, if you folks had it or have it, the front page of that is simply just to give you folks an idea of what we have been doing over the last couple of years to elevate childcare and bring childcare to the forefront with local, regional, state, and to what extent we can, national leaders, whether it's leaders in economic workforce development, legislative, or otherwise. So these are just a few of the things that we have done over the last couple of years, very, very heavily involved with the Regional Economic Development Council and various summits and or meetings that they have convened on childcare. I thought it would be beneficial because maybe not everyone will understand what the available types of childcare are in St. Lawrence County. So that would be on the second page of that PDF handout. And that will go through, and this is great. My notes are right in front of me. I don't even have to look at them. I'm not sure if it's Tony or Nicole or whoever's doing this, but I appreciate it. So right now, the types of legal childcare or regulated childcare in this county and in the state would be daycare centers. I think everybody would be familiar with a daycare center would look like. Head Start centers. Head Start centers can look vastly different depending upon where you are. Head Start in St. Lawrence County is operated by Community Development Program. Their director, the director of the Head Start program, Barb Adams, is a longtime member of our board of directors. But currently, they only operate part day, and that in and of itself creates challenges for some families who are going to need wraparound childcare, and that program is not in session. And unfortunately, also the Head Start centers tend to be, not all, but I believe most of them are located within school districts. So if the school buildings are closed, as we have been with COVID, that significantly impacts their ability to operate. And I do believe, if I'm not telling tales out of school, Dee, you are still a member of the CDP board for Community Development Program as well?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Family and group family daycare providers. So these are the individuals who are in a community who are operating out of their homes. Family would be one individual choosing to watch children in their home, typically 2 to 8 children. Group would be an individual and an assistant. And of course, the numbers would naturally, not always, but typically it would be double the amount of children. School-age childcare programs are very different from many of the above, because if it is a school-age program that is operated by a school district, it does not have to be associated with New York State Office of Children and Family Services, as it would automatically fall under New York State Ed. Now, there may be reasons that a school district would want that school age program to be considered a school age child care program under Children and Family Services, primarily as it would relate to families that receive subsidy to help offset some of the costs. Legally exempt child care is something that really colored into our discussion much as you folks look at what's happening in the area, other than it is exactly as it sounds. They are legally exempt from child care regulations. And that would be primarily because they're only caring for 1 or 2 children. As we think about people that are providing child care in their homes, and once again, Dee or Katie can correct me, the basic rule of thumb is if you are caring for more than 2 children for more than 3 hours a day, chances are you should be licensed or registered with the state of New York to be providing child care. There are exceptions to that, but it goes case by case. But by and large, anyone caring for more than 2 children for more than 3 hours a day would need to be licensed or registered with New York State Office of Children and Family Services. So preschool and nursery schools, because they do kind of factor in here, like Head Start might, typically they're only part day, 2.5 hours, which allows them to stay under that 3-hour window with having to be licensed or registered with the state. They have the option, and I repeat, they have the option of registering with the state education department, but that's not mandatory. So if you had ABC preschool or nursery school operating in Canton, they may or may not be under the auspices of state ed because that is voluntary. Pre-kindergarten, everybody I think is familiar with pre-kindergarten now. It seems it's everywhere. All of our districts have pre-K. In the past, there was only a few districts that had it. They were specialized programs, but since universal pre-kindergarten became funded across the state, all of our school districts have it, typically serving 4-year-olds, 4 and 5-year-olds potentially. As I look at this, the definitions on that page, I want to point out a couple of things. Daycare centers. If someone is looking at opening a daycare center, you're typically looking at 9 to 18 months. It takes a while to get a center open. If you're looking at bricks and mortar and construction, it could be longer than that. So the timeline that I heard, I think tossed about 24 to 36 months. Certainly if you're using an existing facility on the Commerce Park, it might be faster than that, but typically 9 to 18 months. Family and group family daycare providers, when we look at increasing supply, what is the fastest way to increase the supply of regulated childcare slots? These are the 2 categories that tend to fit that bill because they can typically be licensed, registered within, I'm just going to use a general term, somewhere between 60 and 120 days. Ideally by 90 days, but somewhere in that time frame. It's fairly quick, fairly inexpensive. Although there are some costs, but it's fairly inexpensive, unlike a daycare center. So again, I just wanted to make a delineation between what are the types of programs that are out there in St. Lawrence County right now, and of those programs, what programs would be regulated and overseen by the Office of Children and Family Services. Not to be confused with our county DSS, but New York State Office of Children and Family Services. Okay.
Bruce, can I add something here real quick? I just want to mention that pre-kindergarten children are not considered school age or after school care.
Yes.
So that increases another wraparound situation, but they cannot attend school age programs.
Okay. So if we scrolled up just a little bit on what's on the screen, Steve can attest to some of the conversations that were had yesterday with the regional and local economic workforce development folks. And there's that picture of all these successful people started right here. Well, every one of us started as an infant. And the reality is what takes place in that first 1,000 days influences what happens, whether we want to believe it or not, typically influences what happens for the rest of our lives. That could be anything from the education level we'll attain, socioeconomic status we would attain, the amount of remedial or support services we're apt to need as an adult, and or unfortunately the amount of the wrong word for it, but incarceration or issues that we may encounter with the law. As there's more than enough research that documents the first 1,000 days of life put the person on the direction for the rest of their lives. Brain development, everything else, 85% of all brain development is done by the time they ever reach the school district door, which is why a lot of us have really been pushing to get additional funds available for preschool children and preschool programs. And I'll clarify that by saying they don't all have to be this huge academic piece of work, because children learn best through play, children learn best through experiences. If you have kids, if you're grandparents, then you already know that, and I'm preaching to the choir on that. But we do not put anywhere near enough funding, publicly or privately, into those first 3 years of life in the state and in this country, as compared to many other countries in the world. If you ever have a chance to hear from Bill Millett, and I hope that within this next year or so, we will be doing some type of a community forum with him. He can lay out that argument much more succinctly than I can, and he did a little bit yesterday morning that maybe Steve can share with you at a different time. I saw in the questions, people were looking about what is available in the Ogdensburg district and surrounding area. One thing I want to point out as you're looking at this is page 3. The column to the far right is only accounting for children of school age. Now, pre-kindergarten through grade 6. Children that are of an age that might typically be in childcare. I wanted to point that out because these numbers that I'm going to talk about do not take into account the infants, toddlers, and other preschoolers that are within that district. So these numbers are actually much worse than they're going to appear on this chart. I pulled this from a report that we put together last August for the St. Lawrence County Reopening Task Force, when the county task force was looking at not knowing what school districts were going to be doing. Were they going to be open? Were they going to be closed? Part day, full day, remote learning? And childcare became a real significant issue. What are we going to do with all the kids if school's not open? The bottom line is we don't have a good solution for what are we going to do with all the kids if schools aren't open, plain and simple. I'll pick on, because I'm going to go right to the Ogdensburg numbers at the bottom of this page. But each school district is delineated in this kind of an arc around Ogdensburg. It shows us how many daycare centers there are within a school district, how many Head Start programs, centers, I should say, how many family and group family daycare providers there are in that school district, and also if there are any school age programs in that district. School age being a program that is registered with the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, because we all know in the Ogdensburg area, the school has after school programs, and we have the Boys and Girls Club, just like Messina has. I know they've changed the name, but it started out as the Boys and Girls Club up in Messina too. So these are programs that our agency would have involvement with, and in Ogdensburg at the present time, since the Advantage After School programs closed, we no longer have any programs that we would be associated with. So we do have to keep in mind there may be other community programs out there, but they are not something that we would be working with on a daily basis. However, we can get that data for needs assessment information. So what I wanted to point out is any location in the United States that has more than 3 children vying for a childcare slot is considered a childcare desert. So we're hearing about these deserts, which it's the word of the moment, I guess. Whether it's where we have a drugstore desert or a food store desert or whatever it may be. Any district or any community that has more than 3 children looking for a childcare slot is considered a desert. using the Ogdensburg numbers, I hate to do this, but I just want to explain how bad things are. And it's not unique to St. Lawrence County or New York State. This is nationwide. If we look at all the pre-K through grade 6 students, there's 800 in that given school year, there's 866 students. We know that about 65% of all working families are going to need childcare. Statistically, national numbers. Let's say only 50% of those kids needed childcare. We would need 433 childcare slots in Ogdensburg to accommodate just the school age children. We have 121 childcare slots in the Ogdensburg School District, not counting the infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. So just these numbers alone show how significant the need is for regulated childcare slots. I got to be honest with you and simply say, if you build it, will they come? Not always. But as you move forward through this process, we hope to be along side by side working with you on this project. And again, I just want to make sure that everybody understands the numbers look like, oh my God, we should open a center. We may want to do 2 centers. Just because we build it does not mean it will be utilized. Or I should qualify that, does not mean it'll be utilized to an extent that will support the program and allow it to keep its doors open. Having said that, if it's a great program, an excellent franchise, or something you run by yourselves, if you've got strong leadership, strong directors, strong teachers, the program will be used and the program could easily thrive. Typically, when we look at a child care program that has failed, it failed primarily because there was something going on internally that caused it to fail. So at that point, I know I have a list of questions that you sent over. I know that you folks have all of the, I believe, the memorandums and some historical information about Jack and Jill, which was the daycare center within the Commerce Park years ago. What I would like to add to that is maybe simply some anecdotal information that we have. I was here when the center closed, when it was operating. All of us were here when that program was operating, either as community members and or working at the Child Care Council. So your own information should be able to show you that Jack and Jill opened in January of 1991, and it closed in September of 2001. When they opened and when they were open, they had a capacity for 24 infants, 30 toddlers, 46 preschoolers, and 20 school-age children, for a total of 120 licensed capacity. Again, I'm simply relaying anecdotal information that was gleaned from people who worked at that program, and I have no way to say this is factual and or not factual, but the consensus was, in the beginning, things were great. As time went on, financial challenges mounted, financial obligations mounted. I believe the OBPA lease was $1 per year. However, they were responsible for the mortgage on the building. It's my understanding that there did become some issues with the number of families who were receiving assistance through the county. And I believe there was some issues in that billing was not being done timely. So therefore cash flow became an issue. Hence when I said earlier, if you're looking at a center as your own startup or as a franchise, strong directors, strong fiscal oversight, strong board of directors will be required in order for a program to be successful. And I think I'll leave it at that. And if anybody, if we want to have conversations about specific things, we can. But that is what I have been told through individuals who worked at the program, what they observed. I believe in the beginning, NNY 360 website, there are multiple newspaper articles that can be drawn up about Jack and Jill. Everything from the preparation and planning with Mark Sperling and all the others who were involved, to raise funding to get the building built, to the fiscal woes that eventually forced them to close, and right on down to where the city sold off the contents at public auction. I believe it was the city. It may have been the Port Authority, I'm not sure, but I believe it was the city, I'm not sure. There was another daycare center operating at the same time in Ogden. That would have been good beginnings over at Northwest Tech. So there, at one point in time, we had 2 daycare centers operating in Ogdensburg, along with a healthy number of family and group family daycare providers. So I believe the community can support a center. I would want to be sure, or I would want you folks to be sure that if you bring a center or open a center, that you definitely take time and do the homework and speak with other directors in the area and other directors from out of the area of successful child care centers, so that you'll have that to draw upon. We can help you if you want to speak to locals to start with for input. I heard, and I'm trying to be as quick as I can here, I heard a lot of questions about educational components and things of that nature. Any program that's licensed or registered with the state would have an underlying educational component, not to be confused with pre-kindergarten, but there would be an underlying educational component. I know Nicole talked about needs assessments, gaps, that you're in an opportunity funding zone. I want to keep everyone's mind that there is already some very strong and enthusiastic work underway to do to look at a county-wide comprehensive child care study that Arconic is involved in, and they wanted me to invite Steve to join that meeting because I think it can be beneficial for you folks too, whether we're a collaborator, a partner, however it all works out. So we can give the hard data, and the hard data being number of programs, number of child care slots, and on any given day we can do snapshot studies. What is the utilization rate? So we can come up with that hard data. The difficult part is going to be the soft data, as we discussed yesterday morning, and that is, what does the community want? And then key, what does the community need? Because the community wants will always exceed what they actually need. And that's why I say, if you build it, they will come, not always. So we want to make sure that we're looking at the right soft data, and we can help with that, but clearly there's a lot of that information that can be gathered through other sources as well. We're not going to be the only source for that. I do believe that if we do a county-wide comprehensive child care study, we will be looking at contracting out to a consultant, and I'm hoping that it might be Bill Millett, as that is his work, economic development, workforce development, and early childhood education. He travels all over the country. He has been all over New York State and different counties. Most of you are going to be familiar with the North Country Chamber of Commerce, the North Country Workforce Development Institute. We were part of an event October of 2019. It's 2 years now, or a year and a half ago, the Business and Education Forum in Plattsburgh, where there was 70 to 90 community, higher ed, local, state, all kinds of leaders in that room that laid the foundation for where Clinton, Essex, and Franklin counties are going as it relates to child care, economic, and workforce development. And I can tell you now, 2 years later, they are taking off. They are making great strides. They're securing state funding for special projects as a result of that collaborative, and I'm hopeful we can do the same here. I'm going to stop and pause because, again, I know there are questions on the list. There's all kinds of things that I want to say, but I don't know on a time restriction how we are and how much might need to be saved for another meeting. So I'll pause at that point and see if we want to jump to your list of questions or if we just want to keep going.
Thanks. I think your presentation's been very informative so far, and you've actually touched on a lot of the questions that we had. I do have a couple more. I don't know if Nicole or anybody else has any. Just looking down through the list, I know that you've filled in a lot of our questions about what services are available, where the gaps are. It seems like there's definitely a need for childcare pretty much everywhere. So I will go ahead and start with a question that I had, because you talked about how there's regulatory agencies for daycares and who are licensed. Looking at your chart, it looks like there's a great need for daycares outside the Ogdensburg area, definitely in Ogdensburg, but it looks like Morristown, Madrid, Waddington school districts have an even higher need. Is there an additional regulatory agency for daycares to provide transportation in case they need to transport children from a different school district to the daycare center?
Okay. Transportation and childcare gets complicated. Not only liability, but regulatory, for regulatory issues. So Katie, correct me, it is possible for a child care provider to transport children, but there are criteria that needs to be met in order to do that. Most will not because of liability. I'll speak in terms of a family daycare provider or group family daycare provider. If I put a daycare child in my personal vehicle and I get in an accident at the end of my driveway, my personal automotive policy will not cover me because I am now a taxi. I need a commercial policy to cover transporting children. So in most instances, they don't do that. Do some? Absolutely. Some do transport. I honestly really don't want to know if they do, but some do.
For those that do transport, what are the additional agencies that oversee those regulations?
New York State Office of Children and Family Services, if they are a licensed or registered child care program, if they are operating, and I hate this term, but if they're operating outside of the regulations or what most would call illegally, no one is overseeing that transportation.
But does the Office of Children and Family Services have, I'm not sure how to phrase it, is that something that is covered under the Office of Children and Family Services?
When you say covered, I would say that there are requirements that the program would need to meet to be able to transport children. But obviously, when you start doing that, now you're also bringing in potentially Department of Transportation and things of that nature. But I guess the easiest question to that is it easy to transport kids from Ogdensburg to Lisbon or Lisbon to Ogdensburg via a school bus? It's possible, but that would be up to the school district and the child care program. Completely be the call of the school district to be able to do that.
I used to be a nurse and I worked for Head Start when I first became a nurse. So I'm familiar with some of the daycare regulations, and I know that a lot of the Head Start, they fall under the Office of Children and Family Services. They do transport. Is that the school districts that take liability for the transport?
I'm going to answer that one, Bruce. That would depend on who's doing the transporting. Some of the districts do provide their own school buses. If it's, I think Parishville does, I think Brazier does. But if you're using a community development bus, then CDP takes the liability.
CDP does, okay.
Yep. I want to add something too with transportation, and I know this can be an issue, particularly in Ogdensburg. Pre-K programs require that the children be brought to the classroom, which for any providers, if they are doing transportation, it means they have to take all of the kids in the program to the school, take all of the kids out of the vehicle, walk all of the kids into the classroom to drop off the one child, then walk the rest of them back out of the school, back into the vehicle, and back into the home. So it's a challenge.
Hence the reason very few programs transport any children.
I have a couple more questions, but Nicole or anyone else, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in and ask.
If I could, just for a moment, Tony, because I think where you're trying to go with this is, and I have written down. So if you said just because you build it doesn't mean they're going to come, and I think that one of Tony's big concerns is our families lack transportation oftentimes. So is that one of the stumbling blocks, and what are the other stumbling blocks that if their facility is there, why are people not able to use it, or why do they choose not to use it? And I know that transportation would be one of them, and I think that's where Tony was kind of going with that line of questioning.
Absolutely, transportation is an obstacle in any rural community. It's an obstacle in inner cities in many instances, although you wouldn't think it would be. But transportation and childcare definitely go hand in hand. Why would a program not use it? Clearly, transportation would be one issue. By and large, though, I believe it falls to cost. What is the cost of the childcare? And that's the double-edged sword, because if a program does not charge enough, they're not going to survive. But yet, you can get in a situation, and I'm thinking of another childcare center that closed in St. Lawrence County, where they were full to capacity. They had no more openings. The only thing they could do was raise the rates. They couldn't raise the rates because in looking at the families and talking to the families couldn't afford it. But the overhead, they ended up closing, and they were full to capacity. Now, there was a unique twist to that. It was Mother BOCES facility, and as the employees of that program, they had to be paid at a scale and offered benefits that were in line with the non-teachers union. So that was definitely a contributing factor to their overhead.
And one follow-up, you mentioned cost as being another huge obstacle. Are there certain types of licenses or certain types of programs that make families eligible for tuition assistance through the state? Or are there like income-based programs where your tuition cost that you pay is connected to family income?
Sure. I'll take the first one, and then maybe I'll let Dee or Katie answer the second one on this, like a sliding fee scale type basis. But on the first point, St. Lawrence County does receive funds through the Child Care Development Block Grant that come funneled through the state to help families offset child care costs, or to reimburse families for child care costs. We actually do work with the county on that to help families in that process. I can say that St. Lawrence County, we are so fortunate in this county in some regards, but we have not had a waiting list for families who need assistance to help pay for childcare since the early to mid 1990s, where other counties every single year they spend all their money that they have available. So some of that could very well be parent education, that these funds are available and they are out there, and they need to take advantage of them, because the qualification guidelines might surprise some people. However, that's from the parent perspective. From the provider or the program perspective, our current system in St. Lawrence County pays for attendance. It does not pay for the slot. So if I'm only taking my children 2 days a week or 3 days a week, that program is only being paid for the time that they are there. And if there's another family that is full-time, guess what's going to happen? With regard to the sliding fee, Dee, can you comment on that being at the center?
I sure can. I want to piggyback on something you said, though. Also with this subsidy, it does not pay the full cost of full-time care.
No.
For a center right now, the county is paying $195 a week if a child with attendance is in care for 30 hours or more. For example, Canton Daycare, 4-year-olds, it's $223 a week. So the parent is responsible for that difference. And there could also be a parent portion on social services side that the parent has to pay. I'm going to use my daughter as an example. So right now on the subsidy program, she has to pay $65 a week between the parent portion and the difference. We do have sliding scale fees. Canton has it. Potsdam has it. Some of the family daycare providers do that as well. I think Kinder Academy might have it also, which is based on income. And it usually starts from like 0 to 50,000 and then goes up to about 200,000 with what the scales are. And each program is a little bit different.
Dee, I have a couple questions just to add on to what you just said. The first one is, so there's no regulation or anything in place that says like a daycare can't charge more than what is reimbursed, so they can charge whatever they want.
Right.
Okay. And then that's also
the only thing they cannot do is they cannot charge less. They cannot charge a private person less than they charge a subsidized person.
Okay. My second question is, this is also a reimbursement, correct? So the families have to come up with the money up front?
It is supposed to be.
Okay.
That's the way it's designed. Most providers, I can't answer for all of them because they're all their own small business, but most of them will take when DSS sends the check. So they will wait that hopefully week or two. But there are definitely abuses within the system.
Absolutely.
Nicole, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, go ahead, Tony. I have a couple other questions, but I'll let you get back to yours. Those were just kind of, they came to mind as he was.
Okay, so this might be my nurse brain thinking, but I do have a couple questions about daycare programs that administer medications or serve children with disabilities. I know that Head Start obviously does because they employ nurses. Are there childcare facilities in the Ogdensburg and surrounding areas that can administer medications or that could accept children that have disabilities?
I will tackle one bit of that, and then I'm going to refer to Katie because I know Katie has data on that. We do have some providers who will consider, although we have very few of them anymore, children with disabilities or special needs. There is clearly a need for that. There is no question about that, no denying that. Often what might happen is that provider or is that program able to provide the care that is needed, the degree or level of care based upon what supports might be provided through early intervention services, et cetera. But there is nowhere near enough available slots for children with special needs or developmental disabilities. As with regards to medications administration, significant changes several years back to daycare providers being able to administer medications. Katie, I'll let you maybe chime in on that because I know you have that info.
Yeah. So medication administration is.
Katie, did you unmute yourself?
I did. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Technology. So medication administration is a process for any provider, whether it be family daycare, group family daycare center, SAC, daycare centers, where they have to participate in an actual medication administration class along with a healthcare provider, healthcare consultant to do a healthcare plan with them. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot in the county. We average about family daycare, maybe 5 that are actually MAT certified in the area. We have group family daycare, which we have 3. And then with the daycare centers, all of them are actually MAT approved. One of the biggest obstacles I feel that they have, explained to us is liability for one. Everybody's nervous. It's somebody else's child. There is a lot of paperwork. And also the idea of taking it away from other children. So a lot of them opt to have a relative within the 3rd degree of consanguinity come to the home and administer medication, and then they log it. So it is a process. We have, over the last couple of years, you can probably concur, lost several because you do have to re-up like anything in the 3-year period. You have to go through the process again. But it's definitely doable. We do have a few, like I mentioned, and our office does a great job stepping through, helping them go through the entire process. I don't know if that answers your question.
It is an option. It's an option that centers all do. The vast majority of the home-based providers do not. And instead of them becoming MAT, medications administration certified, they choose to find a workaround with the family or family members.
Are there a lot of daycares, or do you find that families need daycares in this area that offer like non-traditional hours, like early morning pickup, late?
Mm-hmm. Dee, would you care to comment on that?
As far as I know, Katie, you might know differently, we have one provider in the Messina area that will do non-traditional hours. That's countywide.
Countywide.
That is a great need. I can speak to it personally. My daughter, she's in a different position now, but she used to have to be to work at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Canton Daycare doesn't open until 7:30. So guess who was taking care of my granddaughter in between?
And to add to Dee, it's true, family daycare, group family daycare, they have their own families. So at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, when their families are coming home, they want their business out the door, per se. So we do struggle with finding the non-traditional hours for parents.
Now, we wouldn't have to look, very far, Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, for examples of where perhaps centers have teamed up with various medical centers or colleges or other business entities to provide after-hours care. But once again, it does complicate things in that it's not. And I'm trying to think of the nicest way to say this. And Dee, you were involved with a center in Florida where the survey was done for a specific audience. Would you utilize after-hours care? And essentially, the survey made it look like, my God, we're going to be full. Until shortly after they started doing it, and parents then decided, no, I want to find a way to have my kids home, or at their grandparents, or at their aunts, or at their friend's house instead of in a daycare center when they're trying to sleep.
Yeah, this was a brand new program that was associated with a large hospital. And originally it was open 24 hours. Within 4 months, they cut it back to midnight. And with 6 months, it was back to 8 o'clock. And these were, for the most part, the nurses were working 10, 12-hour shifts. But it really was, I want my child in their own bed.
Now, do know that we are working with workforce development with Barb Lashley. Barb's been a huge proponent of moving a lot of this initiatives forward on childcare and economic development. So there are opportunities to work with the Department of Labor, possibly the One Stop Center, and have a non-traditional route of recruiting childcare providers who would entertain evening or overnight care. We had begun those discussions in March of 2020. Literally the same month everything shut down. But we had just begun exploring that, and also utilizing workforce development and a one-stop career center to help provide a pool of qualified staff, which is a significant problem for our child care centers. Finding and keeping staff is a significant problem for child care centers. Essentially, that boils down to what they're paid. You know, they have to have all of this background to be able to work here, but you're going to pay me less than or minimum wage. So that's part of the problem too.
Touching base on that, I know that a lot of money that comes from the federal government to help programs like Head Start pay their staff, they have to actually go by the federal minimum wage. They get money from the federal government based on the federal minimum wage, but New York State requires them to pay the state minimum wage. So there's a huge gap in the amount of money that they're getting just for staff wages. Are there any like New York State like funding that helps like fill the gap between no? Okay.
No. There are programs like the Workforce Development Institute who have stepped in around the state in select counties. We are not one, but there are in the area where they are providing additional funding for middle income families who do not meet the eligibility for subsidy through the counties, but yet they still have a need. So there's some assistance out there to help with the family side, but again, the biggest issue we face in the early childhood community is the fact that you're entrusting them with our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, the most important period of their entire lives, and they're not being supported. There's not the funding to support them.
I found when I worked at Head Start, we had to make a lot of compromises with the actual program. We had to make cuts to the actual services that children are getting because of the gap with the staff wages. So I'm sure that's definitely a challenge. We have about, does everybody have to go at 5? I'm just trying to get a sense. We have 5 minutes till 5. What is everyone thinking about for time?
So I'm good. I don't know about the rest of you. You know,
Okay, okay, I have a couple more questions, and I think Nicole said she did. So 2 things for me. I know that child care centers have ratios that they have to follow. My question is there a limit for a center as a whole? Is there a number of children that a center can have, like based on like square footage? If let's say they had unlimited staff, just as a
right.
They're not going to have that, but is there other like requirements for how many children can be in a daycare center?
Yes. Do you want to touch on that? Or yes.
It's basically 35 square foot per child, and that does not include like fixtures like cabinets and things like that. And then infants with cribs, there is an additional square footage requirement. So that whatever the room equals out to, that determines how many children can be in that room. And then there are also group size requirements. Using infants for an example, the maximum group size in a room is 8.
So for example, a center would have to have, if they wanted more than 8 infants, they would have to have 2 dedicated infant rooms with, I would say, 4 staff members, 2 for each room.
Right.
And then there's additional square footage for like the building itself.
The common space doesn't really fit into the equation. It's the room itself that the children will be in.
Okay.
An example, the Jack and Jill Center, they were licensed for 24 infants. So in that situation, that would have required 3 infant rooms, and that would have been 6 staff members. 3, 1 more. Yeah.
Plus,
or more, because the staff member can't work for 10 to 12 hours.
Sure.
And that would also have to take into account, they would have to have 3 rooms that that met the square footage requirements
Right.
as well. Okay.
Those square footage requirements are going to be different than our local building codes. And that is something moving forward. If you're looking at a facility, and this clearly comes later down the road, but not only does it have to meet the local building code, but there are New York State fire safety codes, which Office of Children and Family Services has their own inspectors that must pre-inspect the facility before it's allowed to open.
Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you. While we're speaking about facilities, I had just, one of the ideas we toyed around with was using an existing facility in Commerce Park. What would be the requirements to bring a building to code? There's probably new air circulation, filtration requirements that have been added, for sure, about the type of flooring you're using, the heat, those kinds of things. Can you just touch on those?
If you were looking at taking an existing facility and converting it to or reconverting it back to a daycare center, I would not necessarily get involved in that myself personally, nor our office. That would be a discussion that we could facilitate with the state fire safety representatives through the Syracuse Regional Office, New York State Children and Family Services. We work with them every day. So again, that's something that I'm not qualified to speak to, and I wouldn't want us to. But yes, there certainly are criteria that it would have to meet. No doubt.
Understood. Thank you. And then I don't want to put you on the spot by asking this right now, but if you could think of maybe some very successful centers that you could share the names with in case we wanted to tour another facility and talk to them about, from their development and planning stages, somebody that's kind of, fiscally grounded and is going to sustain their building plan, I guess, or their facility plan, if you could pass those names along, just so we can get a better idea of what to be looking at.
I clearly think that in this process, first of all, not first, but there will be a decision made at some point whether this is going to be an OBPA program or if you're going to provide a facility for someone to run it or a franchise to come into. Each has pluses and minuses, but yes, we have 4 daycare centers in St. Lawrence County, D, correct me if I'm wrong, that are not Head Start programs. We have Canton Daycare, SUNY Potsdam, Kindercare, actually 5. Kindercare is in Potsdam, and then Right Beginnings and right downtown. There's 2 in Messina, right downtown Messina.
Toddler Town.
Toddler Town, yes, thank you. So each have different situations and facilities. In terms of new facilities or renovation projects, SUNY Potsdam Childcare Center just moved into a new facility last year, brand new facility on the campus. And Canton Daycare Center has clearly a new facility that is on the grounds with Maplewood over
United Helpers. Yeah.
Yep, United Helpers. St. Lawrence University has been very involved in that project
Yes,
over there as well. Yeah, there are definitely local directors you could talk to help give you a feel of what this is going to entail. And they are both successful programs. And again, there are other programs as well, but from a program type thing, those are the 2 that immediately come to mind. Although all of the other programs have ultimately ended up renovating an existing structure, whether it's downtown Messina or just off the rivers of Messina or out on 56 in Potsdam. So again, yes, we can easily provide you with a list of directors for all of our centers. Not a problem at all.
And Bruce, if I may, Nicole, in the past when we've had outreach regarding daycare centers, we were able to contact the directors just to talk to them to see if they were willing to walk through with the individual interested, just because they're busy and some, but we would be able to facilitate and help with, might get your foot in the door a little quicker too, so that's also a benefit.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I do have to say, at this point, because of the virus, there are no visitors in the programs.
Yes.
Nicole, do you have anything else right now?
I think I'm good right now. Thank you, Tony, very much.
Okay, anybody in the boardroom, Steve or Sam?
Tony, I'm good. I've got something for Bruce. Bruce, what I came out of that was when Bill spoke of how we reframe so-called, childcare or daycare, and basically put an emphasis that as a whole, we need to change the conversation to talking about, we talk about birth to 3 years old, talk about early education, and not just getting a child a coloring book and saying, we're taking care of you. To speak to, because you've had more interaction with Bill, but I thought that was a very good way of looking and trying to sell what we're trying to do here on to change people's attitudes there so that they're more maybe interested or committed to, even if they don't have daycare or, children that require that, but you get a change in the public as far as how you look at child now.
Absolutely, and you were part of that meeting, so you heard some of the discussion that when Bill talks to the powers at hand, the legislators, the economic development, the workforce development, the local leaders, he is talking purely economic and workforce development because he gets it. He understands that the infant today is the workforce of tomorrow, and the investment that we make today in providing a good quality early childhood environment creates that workforce of tomorrow while maintaining the workforce of today. It is a win-win for business. And if you also remember in that conversation, to put things in perspective, we look at the United States and investment, and thankfully through in recent years, we've seen a few $100 million in increases in terms of funds that are available for early childhood programs. I know there's going to be more as a part of the COVID relief package. However, all we have to do is look just over the border, right out our back door, about 3/4 of a mile across the St. Lawrence, or closer to you guys yet, sitting in the boardroom. Ontario, 2 years ago, announced a $3 billion, with a B, a $3 billion commitment to early care and education. While we're making strides nationally at a level of several hundred million. Granted, the United States spends billions on childcare as well, but we're comparing a province to an entire country in terms of a commitment to their early childhood education programs. 2 different countries, 2 different systems. I totally get that. But within your office park, you have a lot of Canadian connections and a lot of Canadian companies. So as you mentioned, some of those companies may come to the table with a totally different perspective than some of the US companies that may be in the park as well. And they could potentially be a good partner for you as this project moves forward, trying to, and I'm using the word sell is not the right term, but sell this project to others who may be in the park or in the community.
Thank you. Tony, we're good here. Tim, is there anything you wanted to add? Tim is with our lobbying and law firm, and he's been very good at really looking at the legal end of what we can and can't do here. And he's you know, he's been on the front end of this, so, I just wanted to introduce you to him.
It's nice to meet everyone.
Thank you for being here, Tim. And I guess one of my final comments, even though I want to make sure everybody understands, we will make ourselves available to future meetings in any capacity you need us, as a partner or a collaborator, however you want to proceed. As you proceed, I want to mention a word of caution about the facility, about the building. The facility that was in the complex was brand new. It was state of the art. It had a kitchen that most restaurants in New York City would die for. We also had a new daycare center built in Potsdam many years ago on the Potsdam Central School District property. A wonderful architectural structure, beautiful architectural, big beams. The programs could not afford those facilities. Let's make sure the facilities that we use or that we build are for what they're intended for. I understand there's an architectural component to all of this. However, don't make the facility or the mortgage so big that the program is doomed from the start. Keep it simple. It's all about the kids. It's all about the functionality, more so than the architecture.
Thank you. That's good advice. And it just made me think of one more thing.
Sure.
And I guess thinking through, so is it possible to start a facility or to start a daycare program out small and then grow it from year to year or across multiple years, you know, to almost scaffold in there like a start small, and in 7 years, maybe it will look like this if the need is there. And if that is possible, then do you have to be recertified every time you add? Like if you were going to add space, let's say you were going to start with 4 rooms, but you had the bones or the skeleton built for an expansion project down the road, but didn't utilize that space. Could you then, years down the road, expand into 2 more rooms or two more rooms? And then what does that licensing process look like each time you go through that expansion?
Sure. So a great person to talk to is going to be either Dee or Nancy Addison, the director at Canton Daycare Center, because that's exactly what they've done. Started out with a set size, and then they have expanded from there. So yes, you can start out with a manageable size and expand. Every time you do expand or you add new space, it will require new inspections, new fire safety inspections. You'll have to be working with your licensing rep, whoever's running the program will have to work with their licensing rep. And there must be constant communication throughout that process. But long and the short, is it possible? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. To that end, please keep in mind your clients, if I can refer to the children, because that's your commodity, is going to be infants, toddlers, preschoolers. You are going to have possibly a few kids that might be in pre-K if parents don't choose to put them in pre-K, but infants, toddlers, and preschoolers and school-age children. No going in, and don't take our word for it, but talk to your directors as you're doing your work. Infant rooms do not make money. Infant rooms lose money. Then you hope to offset those losses or potentially any profits through your preschool, toddler and preschool and school age rooms, simply because the ratios, the number of children is higher. So infant rooms are essential to feed the toddler room, but they'll operate in the red. It's a given.
Does anyone have anything else? I think you've answered a lot of our questions and given us a great starting point, and talking with you has been very informative. So I really thank you for attending this meeting, and I'm sure that we'll be asking you to come to meetings in the future, because this has been really helpful. So if anyone doesn't have anything else, I'd like to schedule our next meeting just because I want to keep this going. I hope to meet again within like the next 2 weeks. I was looking, and this could just be with the committee, or if we do need you guys to come back, I guess we can be in touch. But Nicole and Steve and Sam, I was thinking maybe April 15th.
I could be available after 4 o'clock. Yes, after 4 o'clock.
So after 4, do you mean right at 4, or do you mean like 4:30 or 5?
So I have a youth advisory board meeting from 3 till 4-ish. Sometimes a little over, sometimes a little shy of.
Okay. What were you saying, Sam?
That's Thursday the 15th.
Yes. So Nicole, I'm free that whole evening. So whatever time you think works best, just let me know.
Does 4:30 work for everybody?
That'll work.
Okay, so our next meeting will be April 15th at 4:30. So thank you guys again, Bruce, and this has been a really, really informative, so I appreciate it. So if there's nothing else, I'll just adjourn the meeting.
Thank you all very much for helping us sort through this stuff as we get started.
Steve, just know that I'm going to keep you on the email list as we continue the work with Arconic, and clearly invite you to participate in that at any point in time that you want to as we have future meetings, because ultimately we hope to do a comprehensive countywide childcare needs assessment study. So anything that would come out of that would certainly benefit the work that you're doing right now for the OBPA. So.
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.